To give a little bit of background information, this happened when I was about maybe 7 years old, and this took place during school. Now, I was going to school, a new school, which I will not state for whatever reason, but it was closest to my house. One of the times when I was 7 years old and in the second grade, our teacher one day took us to a park to play, and it was sometime around before fall started. Our teacher was pretty nice, and she was very laid back, and all of us kids were playing at the park. It was close to a school, and it was close to a rec center, so it wasn't really that far to go to, but this time, this was actually pretty fun as a kid. Now, here I was, playing around in the slides and even on the forts and whatnot with my friends, when all of a sudden there was some creepy looking dude. He was sitting on the bench and he kinda looked like he was homeless. I couldn't really clearly tell what he looked like, but because of the fact that he was hiding his face, but he did look homeless. I was just thinking maybe he must have been maybe coming over to his spot where he waits for people to give him money or something. I just ignore what's going on and continue to play at the park. However, this is when things started getting really creepy. When I was swinging on the swings, this dude goes up to one of the kids and asks them what their names were. Now, I clearly knew that this was starting to get me suspicious about this man, so I listened in on what he said. He basically asked the kid if they wanted any money, and he said he'd go get some. He obviously went away, and the kid didn't even follow because the teacher was there. And obviously, the teacher had scolded the student for it. It wasn't until the other day at school as well, maybe fast forward to maybe around the summer, before school was being let out for the summer break. We saw this exact same man again, but this time he went up to me while I was sliding down the slide, gave me a really uncomfortable smile and said, "Hey, do you want to get a Barbie doll house?" he said. Now, this was getting really weird for me, but I tried to ignore him and I said to him no and that I'm fine. But he then grabs me and scoops me up almost. Just as he was about to do that, one of the teachers shouted at him, "Hey, what are you doing with her?" He lets me go, and I obviously went back and I was nearly petrified of what happened. It turns out that this man was trying to kidnap children, and he has succeeded, which is why some of the kids have gone missing in the area. Most of them turned out to be dead, unfortunately. Very few of them were survived. It turns out that he was some person who was selling kids to other countries. He was eventually arrested by the cops and he was thrown in prison for a long time. I don't even know what would have happened if my teacher wasn't even there to stop him. Chances are something bad could have potentially happened, and I would not be here as of today. Now, to give a bit of a background history, this took place sometime in 2016, and it was the start of second semester. I had digital art class in the morning, and it was the very first period of the day. Now, 2016 was mainly stressful. Ever since I lost my granddad from my mom's side, my life has gotten a little bit, well, more bumpier as it goes on. Shortly after his passing, I was working on doing some stuff in the arts program, which was a digital art class. We were assigned to edit a photo of whatever we like, and that's what exactly I was doing. As I was kind of editing the photo, there was this one student that stood maybe a few feet away. Not really stood like he stood up, but he seemed to be kind of suspicious. We'll call him Dominic. Dominic seemed to be maybe 2 years younger than me, as I was in a grade 10 digital art class. Now, you guys might be confused as to why a grade 12 would be in a classroom full of people younger than she is. Well, mainly to cut to the chase, is because when I got out of the educational special program, I ended up up be going into regular classes with other students and alike. I didn't really mind that, as I've been wanting to get my independence for a while. As I was looking over at Dominic, he doesn't really seem to do much. He just plays computer games and occasionally will go back to work whenever the teacher gives him shit. Now, this Dominic guy seemed to be okay, so I thought maybe he's just a random student that liked to, well, do some stuff. So, I decided to why not just sit there and just continue my work. So I did. But it wasn't until maybe after when the bell rang, and since there was no class after mine, since I was a little bit late and wanted to grab my stuff, as I had to finish up something last before going back into the other classroom. Now, before I headed off to math, I looked over at Dominic's computer, and as my teacher was doing stuff on his laptop, I looked to see that Dominic left us some USB. Now, I could definitely say right now that this was kind of not common, and I thought that maybe he might have had some schoolwork. I took it and put it in my pocket, thinking that if I saw him, I would give it back to him and let him know he left it in the classroom. However, this is when things started to get really, 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 really strange. And what I mean really, really strange, I mean something confused me a bit with this USB. Now, normally this would be my curiosity, but I usually knew better than to plug in flash drives to even spy or even look into other people's stuff. But since I decided to go look for Dominic, I decided to see if I can return it to him. Maybe fast forward to maybe about the next day, Dominic didn't show up at the school, but I ended up speaking to my teacher saying that I actually found something that must have belonged to him. It turns out that it was actually a USB drive, and this was before class, as I arrived at the classroom earlier than usual, as my bus was early, but it was alright since I was early, as I had a dentist appointment that day. I ended up giving him the USB, and my teacher ended up looking over for it and had some strange feelings of what this would contain. So we plugged in the USB and waited for a bit, and then we looked for the USB. They seemed to be empty files, as I thought that maybe there might have been some schoolwork. But then what we saw was honestly not really terrifying, but very messed up. There was a file that contained unknown files, so my teacher clicked on it, and the worst was to come. There were pictures of women, mainly women from our school. What I mean by women was girls from school, ranges from freshman year to graduating year. I honestly was very shocked to see that most of the girls that this Dominic guy had took were from gym class, locker rooms, and etc. And a few of them contained girls sleeping in their own bedrooms. He was reported to the right authorities, and they arrested him. Of course, he couldn't really go to prison since he was 15, but at the same time, he was basically put under house arrest with the exception of school. I really don't know why these laws really are messed up at times, but let's just say this Dominic person has something to hide, and I don't even know why he was doing this, but he got expelled at least a week later, and I don't know where he is to this day, and I surely hope he never sets foot into another school again. To cut to the chase, this actually happened to one of my friends, which we'll call her Diana for the sake of this story. This took place in 2012, and Diana was in sophomore year of high school. Now, she was a good friend of one of my friends, and she was one of the best girls that anyone really liked. Diana wasn't really into dating because she was mainly a lesbian. But of course, a lot of the students really didn't seem to mind her being a lesbian. I mean, it was a friendly LGBTEQ community school. It was at least one of them. Now, Diana was going to school that year in 2012 when something really freaky happened. While she was in high school, all of her life, it's all seemed to be flowing very well. Of course, she would occasionally meet some dudes that were looking really creepy to guys who looked really weird and etc. There was this one time, however, that she dreaded the most. While Diana was walking to her classroom, there was all of a sudden this dude, this man, looked to be maybe at the same age as her. His name was Kevin, and he said he was in the same class as her. They were taking science together, and Kevin was talking to Diana for a little bit, exchanging conversations on basically what their interests were, and even on what their plans were to do after high school. This started to maybe think Diana might have found a good friend, so Diana smiled and continued. However, Kevin started to be following Diana everywhere she went. This didn't seem to bother Diana for a little while. Eventually, it became very annoying when he showed up in almost every class just to meet her up. Now, Diana was getting really uncomfortable with this, so she tried going to a different route so he would not be able to find her. Now, something really strange beginning to happen. When Diana went to her classroom one day, Kevin was not even there, and she thought that maybe he must have gave up. But however, Diana was then called to the principal's office maybe at least after the first class, and the principal said that this Kevin dude was basically a stalker. He had stalked and harassed many girls at school, and they had pulled out some stuff. Mainly, there were pictures. They were usually pictures all of Diana. There was some where she was going to school, some waiting for her waiting at the bus, and even some of her in her own house. Now, Diana wanted to press charges on Kevin, but seeing that he was nowhere to be found, as soon as they must have found out that Kevin must have found out somehow he was caught and knew he had to run off. But that was something Diana would never get over with. Her being the lesbian, of the school, she ended up becoming really paranoid with Kevin, which is why she starts walking with her friends to classes, and even then they walk her there. A couple of times her closest friends have done it, but she had no idea of what happened to Kevin. Her guess is that Kevin must have got suspended from school, which I'm hoping, and same with Diana, that that's a good thing, because Kevin needs to stop. But eventually he had never contacted Diana in any way, shape, or form. But I still wonder today, where is Kevin today?